Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. 90-Day Fiance. Happily ever after? Star Julia reveals her pregnancy news to her and Brandon's friends. The Virginia countryside had never felt louder. A soft breeze carried the scent of fresh hay, cut grass, and the lingering echoes of long-ago arguments about farm chores that once defined the early chapters of Julia Trubkina and Brandon Gibbs' journey. But today, the farm wasn't a battleground. Today, it was the backdrop for a secret Julia had guarded like a fragile treasure. One she was finally ready to share. Inside the modest farmhouse kitchen, sunlight spilled across a wooden table scattered with mismatched mugs and a tray of store-bought pastries. Brandon kept pacing, occasionally stopping to look through the window, fingers drumming anxiously against his thigh. "They're going to be here any minute," he muttered. Julia, seated at the table, tried to focus on calming her racing heart. She had rehearsed a dozen different ways to deliver the news. Directly, too blunt. Playfully, too risky. Dramatically, it felt too staged. Every imagined scenario ended in chaos, laughter, or disbelief. But maybe chaos was okay. After all, it brought them here in the first place. "You want tea?" Brandon asked. She shook her head. "My stomach already crazy." Brandon sat beside her, their hands brushing. "We'll tell them together." Julia bit her lip. It wasn't telling their friends that worried her. It was telling anyone. Her life in America had been a constant balancing act, between cultural expectations and personal dreams, independence and compromise, family duties and new beginnings. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for this new chapter. A car door slammed. Then another. Voices drifted in. Low, familiar, friendly. Brandon's friends, who had followed their journey long before the cameras, who had seen the couple survive cramped apartments, disagreements about Vegas weddings, and endless tension with Ron and Betty. Brandon stood up. "They're here." Julia smoothed her shirt, fingers briefly brushing the small swell beneath the loose fabric. Just enough to remind her this was real. The living room filled quickly. First came Ashley and her husband Grant, arms full of energy and southern warmth. Then Kevin and Emma, who still teased Brandon for ever letting TLC cameras into his life. Finally, Megan, who had once jokingly claimed she should have been cast as Julia's maid of honor. Each person greeted Julia with laughter, hugs, and questions about life off camera. "I swear, you two are too quiet lately," Ashley said as she plopped onto the couch. "Either you're busy being boring adults, or something big is happening." Julia felt the heat rise in her cheeks. Brandon cleared his throat. "There is something," he said. The room shifted, the chatter dissolving into anticipation. Even the old dog curled at the foot of the couch lifted its head. Julia reached for Brandon's hand, suddenly grateful for his warmth. He gave her a subtle nod. "We're here because," Brandon began, but his voice faltered. He laughed nervously. "Julia is better at talking." "No," she whispered. But the eyes were already on her, curious, waiting. She stood. Every second felt stretched thin, like the moment before a roller coaster drops. The joy and fear mingled in her chest, making her voice waver. "I have news," she said. "Big news." "Well, tell us," Megan said. Julia exhaled. "I'm pregnant." Silence. It was a thick pause, long enough to make Julia question whether her English had failed her. But then, like a dam breaking, sound erupted. Ashley screamed, leaping from the couch to hug her. Grant whooped. Kevin shouted a stunned congratulations. Emma covered her mouth with tearful eyes. Megan began firing questions, barely finishing one before jumping to the next. "When? How far? Did Ron and Betty know?" Julia laughed. Overwhelmed. The tension melted from her shoulders as the room wrapped her in love she hadn't expected. "How far along?" Emma asked. 3 months, Julia said. 3 months, Brandon repeated, as if saying it aloud made it more real. Megan squeezed Julia's hand. "How are you feeling?" "Excited. Terrified. But happy." "Same," Brandon added. "Mostly excited. Very terrified." Kevin clapped him on the shoulder. "Dude, you'll be great. You survived TV. Parenting should be easy." They laughed, though everyone knew parenting would be its own unpredictable storyline. Julia sank back into her seat as the questions continued. About cravings, nursery plans, names. She answered what she could. She didn't know much yet. She only knew that something inside her had shifted. The world, once heavy with pressures of immigration and identity, now pulsed with new meaning. Eventually, conversations split into small pockets. Ashley and Emma debated baby shower themes. Kevin quizzed Brandon about fatherhood sacrifices. Megan stuck close to Julia, her tone gentler now. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Julia nodded. "I didn't know how everyone would react." "Are you kidding? We're thrilled. You and Brandon worked so hard to build a life here. Now you get to build a family." Julia's chest tightened. That word, family, felt surprising. She thought of Ron and Betty. Their complicated relationship, filled with both love and unsolicited advice. How would they react? Would they be thrilled? Or smother her again? She wasn't sure. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know how to raise baby in America. Everything different." "You'll figure it out," Megan said. "If there's one thing you've proven, it's that you adapt." Julia smiled. She hoped that was true. Brandon rejoined them, his expression soft. "We should tell them." Julia froze. She knew whom he meant. "Now?" she asked. "It's time," he said. "They'll want to know." She nodded. Ron and Betty lived only 20 minutes away. But emotionally, they sometimes felt much farther. Despite their support at times, Betty's tendency to insert herself into every decision had fueled arguments early in their marriage. Boundaries had been drawn and redrawn many times. Now, though, this was bigger than the past. "You ready?" Brandon asked. Julia hesitated, then steadied herself. "Yes." They said goodbyes, promising updates, dinner plans, baby shopping trips. The energy in the room still buzzed as they slipped into the cool Virginia evening. Driving to Ron and Betty's, Julia stared out the window, watching fields blur into twilight. Her future, once frighteningly unknown, now felt clearer. Not easier, but purposeful. "You're quiet," Brandon said. "I think about what this means," she replied. "Everything changes now." Brandon nodded. "Yeah, but good change." She hoped so. As their car turned into the familiar driveway, Julia's heart pounded again. She placed a hand over her abdomen, not to hide, but to connect. This was happening. This was real. And as the porch light flicked on, revealing Betty's silhouette against the doorway, Julia took a breath. Whatever came next, she wasn't facing it alone.